or what are the minimum salaries that you need to pay to sponsor yourself for within the company?
Yeah, good question. So now, as you all, if people are on H1B, you would know that when you as a beneficiary, right, somebody petitions your H1B, it's based on your location and title. So there's an LCA that a petitioner, like the company, files to make sure that they have to pay the minimum wage for you, right? So I'm in Boston, and in my company, I created a role for myself as a principal engineer. So I got the salary for that. And I had to meet that salary to be even have it be acceptable to be an H1B offer. Now that's an H1B rule. And then when you file for it as a company, you have to show that a business can afford this employee, right? So now that's a lot of case making. I guess I'm not an attorney here. So, but with my experience, I had to show, that I could afford 12 months of salary, like 1 year. Right? I can afford an employee for 1 year, and 3 month of bank statement. If you have a funding, if you have VC backed, I think it becomes easier. My company was completely bootstrapped. I put my own money in, but then the revenue was coming in. I had an app, so we had revenue coming for Apple, and we could show that there is it's actually a legit business. And if you have potential clients in the future, if you have to show the business plan, and you can show a lot of things, a lot of case making from a law perspective, to just prove that you're a legit business with a future plan. I hope that answers your question, but if there's a follow up, let me know.
Yeah, for sure. I'll go to the first question. So, this person wanted to know what scale can be a newly created company, a draw, and then H1B, and then also for applying for a green card.
Don't
I
have
think
familiar.
he wanted to know like how big of this startup company needs to be in terms of
Yeah.
foundations.
I mean, like big in terms of, I assume you mean revenue, or I mean, big doesn't have to be employees. Like, for example, I was the first employee of my own company. So it doesn't have to have 100 people in it, right? So what is the USCIS looking for is like meeting the requirements. That's just very law and case making. It's very logical if you think about it. Law says you need to afford the salary of the H1B beneficiary. So are you big enough to hire this person for X role, right? Which is that you might be in tech, you might be somewhere else. So depending on the role you have and depending on the location you have, what is the minimum salary you have? So are you big enough for that? And then you got to have some like a business plan and revenue. You got to have a business that's doing something.
If I open the company that is not under my major of areas, which wasn't what I studied. Can
Hmm.
I apply for my H1B or green card? This is a very good question.
Yeah,
For example, somebody without a software engineer background, can
yeah,
he do a startup in tech and AI?
yeah. I mean, look, there's a different rule for a company and the one for H1B. You can start any company you want, right? Like who stops you? Like, nobody is qualifying you for a business. Your qualification of business is, right? It has to have a legal thing, proper address, and all that stuff, or whatever business needs. Now, the H1B requirement is a role in the company, right? So let's say I start, I don't know, like pick a retail shop, and my specialization is I need an IT person because I also do e-commerce, right? And e-commerce requires IT. So you could have a role that requires website development and that requires an IT person that you can hire in a shop that's nothing to do with tech. So H1B role is a requirement for what you need from that employee. Company can be anything you want. And most companies are tech companies at this point. So you could think about like what could create a role for you.
All right, we'll go to the next one. I'm not able to prove that my company has enough money to sponsor H1B. However, if I don't work for that company, um, how can my company make money? I don't know if this question makes sense to you.
It kind of does, but I think the question is that I start a company myself, and it's a chicken and egg problem, which is if I start a company myself and if I don't do any work, how is the company going to make any money? But if it's not going to make any money, how can I ever work for it?
Right,
Right.
right.
So, well, look, if you start a US business, you could hire a CEO. You're an investor, right? So hire somebody wherever. It doesn't have to be in US. So if I start a restaurant tomorrow on H1B, I could hire a bunch of employees there to work for the restaurant, and I can still be the owner. And at some point, I can decide to work for it.
Yeah,
So nobody is stopping you from hiring a CEO for a company, right?
I
Or
think one
whoever
of
you
his,
want.
yeah, for sure. I think one of your point, which was very important during your presentation, was that your company doesn't necessarily have to make money in day one.
Yeah.
You could invest some money into the business, not necessarily a lot of money, but you have to invest a little bit of money. And then once it generates the income, is then when you transfer to that company, or is then when you
Yeah.
apply to H1B.
Yeah. Let me touch one quick thing. I just was reminded of that. The H1B is not the only way. I wrote that in my article too. The other way is the O1 visa. And I think we have much time left today, but the 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 key thing about O1 to understand, O1 is a little bit harder to prove. Like you have to, it's the same as EB1, you have 9 criteria. You have to say that you're a specialized person that's fit for the role. It's a little bit more paperwork, but it's doable. Now, the benefit of O1 visa is that it doesn't have a minimum salary requirement. Okay, so a lot of founders, if you go to Bay Area, YC based founders who come from India and China, they file O1 from India and China for their businesses, and they come into this country on an O1. So they directly come in. I didn't do it because O1 doesn't have a very good dependent visa.
Mm.
H1B comes with H4. That's number one, and I wanted that. And number two, I also had my EB1, so I didn't even do, like, I had no reason to do O1 because my H1B transfer would have just happened, right? But you can look at that if you want to.